issue when we're doing the landscape planting is creating edging around flower beds. You basically have three choices when you're going to do edging around flower beds. You can do wood, I guess four. You can do wood, you can do plastic, you can do metal, you can do concrete. Again, if you've got trees around, avoid the concrete. Now you can do some nice concrete edging where you don't have trees and roots to deal with. They have these machines that come in and just add the concrete. The machine moves along any path you want it to follow, and you create a really pretty little concrete edging. But again, if you're over tree roots, it's not going to be very long before that edging gets broken up. If you're going to do that, do it in like 2-foot increments with the expansion joint between, because it will get broken otherwise. Plastic edging, just avoid it. I've not seen one yet that lasts at all. In fact, most of them won't even stand up to a good weed eater. It's terrible what happens, and it's cheap, it's easy, it's flexible. But I don't know anybody that's ever put in plastic edging that didn't regret it a little ways down the road. I think the best edging out there nowadays is one of the good steel edgings. Best brand name in the business is Ryerson, although all of them are reasonably good. If you want to do a wooden edging, you can, but you're almost going to have to find Redwood, which is going to be expensive. They make something you can still get some places called Redwood Bender Board. And what it is 4 inches wide, it's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it does make a very pretty edging. That's what we used originally 28 years ago when we built the nursery. Some of the old brick sidewalks up here you'll see still have wooden edging there, and Redwood lasts a long, long time. The hint that I want to give you, if you're going to use any kind of wood like that for edging, is before you start trying to bend it, wet it down. If it's a short piece, get a kiddie swimming pool and put the whole thing in there and soak it. If it's a long piece, go back and forth with the hose, wait 5 minutes, go back and forth again. The wetter you get that wood, the more you can bend it without breaking it. You get a dry piece of bender board, you try to bend it at all, then it's going to snap and splinter. You soak that board down, you can bend that thing into a pretzel, and then stake it, get it firmly in place. It'll make it a whole lot easier to do. So again, one more hint, and don't ask me how I learned that, but I probably still have the splinters to prove it in my hands from those days. Those are just a few hints on doing things like patios, like decks, like walkways. We talked last week about laying them out once you've got your plan already drawn, but when you go back to implement it, if you want to vary your walkway a little bit or something, it's back to the old, get the garden hose out and lay it out in the pattern that you want it, and you can move it back and forth, you can work till you get it just the shape you like. And when you actually go to install your brick or your stone or whatever else, put in one side of your edging only, and then put your brick or whatever in and work across. When you get it the proper width, put the other side in. Again, I watch people that say, well, I'm going to have my walkway 36 inches wide, that's 12 courses of 3-inch brick. So they put both edges in. And they start moving, and when they get over to the edge, they're 11.5 bricks, away from that. And so it's a lot easier to put the brick in first, and then you can just put your new edging up against it. But the steel edgings these days are going to be probably the best thing to use. They're easy to cut with a sawzall, or even with just a standard hacksaw with the right blade on it, and just about anybody can do it. But that's the kind of edging that you really want to use. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is the order in which you go about creating this new landscape that you've come up with a plan for. What do you do first? Well, the first thing you do is anything that involves digging trenches. If your sprinkler system needs to be reworked, that is probably the #1 thing on the list. Now, one thing that I would always consider, you've got your new plan laid out, think about how you're going to water it, and plan on having plenty of hose bibs out in the yard, hose connections out in the yard. Why? Well, this year should certainly tell you, and I don't know how many of y'all have read SAW's Drought Regulations, some of which are very stupid, by the way, but I just can't believe these things. Do you know, well, you're going to be restricted, you are restricted now to watering on certain days. If you want to water with a watering can or a bucket, you can only water on your specified water day with your watering can. But if you want to turn the hose on and walk out and use the hose, you can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, what's going to use more water, a watering can or a hose? Duh. Well, been having several discussions with saws over the past week, but oh no, I did not tell him what I talked to him about that. But I did talk to him yesterday. They're figuring that it may not be more than a week or two before we go into stage 3 water restrictions.
What is stage?
If we go to stage 3, you can only use your sprinkler every other week. Now, most plants are going to get by okay with every other week watering. But if you're like me, you're going to have a lot of plants, and I don't live in San Antonio, so it doesn't affect me. I live in the hill country where our restrictions are already a lot more severe than they are here. But remember, you'll be able to use that hose anytime you need it. But you've got a choice. You know, you said, I'm going to have a sprinkler system, so I don't need hose bibs. Yeah, so now from the corner of your house where the nearest hose bib is, to the back corner of your yard is now 230 feet, and good quality hoses are not cheap. So if you're redoing that landscape, this is a real good time to put some extra hose bibs around the yard. If you're working on your sprinkler system, it's real easy to tie your hose bibs to the pressure lines in your sprinkler system. It's not a big deal. But that's the first thing we want to do, is if we're going to dig any trenches for sprinklers or for additional water lines, first thing we do when we get ready to implement our landscape plan. If we're going to do any outdoor lighting that's going to require buried lines, wires, if you're going with high voltage, you're going to have to put it in conduit and put it at least 12 inches below the surface of the ground. You're going to put a special kind of plastic on top of it that says buried line underneath. You can put some sand on top of that. But again, this involves digging, and that should be the first thing you do before you start working on implementing your landscape plan. But keep in mind where your decks are, where your walkways are to some extent, but any kind of physical structure that you're building, and try to avoid putting a water line underneath that, or any kind of line. Because Murphy says that someday you're going to have to do something to that line. And if two joints are going to pull apart, you heard about that big water leak downtown in San Antonio, get ready to hear about a lot more of those. Because our clay soils, when it gets wet and dry, does this. And it literally will pull pipes apart. And so try to avoid, if you have to put a line underneath where you're going to put a patio or something like that, do not make a joint in the middle of the deck. Even if it means using an extra piece of pipe, cut it at this edge, put that piece of pipe in there. The pipe's 20 feet long, and very few people are going to do a deck bigger than 20 feet. You'll have another piece joint out there, but you don't have a joint underneath any hard structure like that, because if a pipe fails, that's where it's going to fail, is where it's joined to another pipe. On the subject of water lines and sprinkler systems, we talked about this last week, but it'll be worth repeating. Do not use anything less than Schedule 40 pipe. Do not settle for the cheaper thin wall pipe, because that stuff, you'll be amazed how easy it is to make a hole in it. I should have brought my magic digging bar today. I'm afraid somebody would want me to demonstrate it. I've got a heavy iron bar with a point on the end. I can throw it up in the air, and anywhere you are, it will come down, point down on top of the largest water line in the yard and create an immediate Old Faithful effect. But anyway, settle for nothing less than Schedule 40 pipe throughout. Yes?
For those of us that don't have the magic bar, like for my service entrance from the water meter into the house, what would be the best way to find that line I could tap in before it gets to the house?
Well, you can, probably best thing is call saws to come out and find it.
They'll do that?
They will normally, I think they will do that.
To the house?
Will they?
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
They mark mine, they come out with little flags, or else they
Yeah.
spray it.
and it's important to know where the cable TV line is and other things. I hesitate to tell you this because I promised my business partner I would never repeat this in public, but since she's 1,000 miles away, I will go ahead and tell you this. And you can try this. I mean, it's voodoo, it's black magic, whatever you want to call it. But take 2 metal rods, like coat hangers, bend them into an L shape. One L about this long, and then the piece maybe 18 inches long like that. And hold them loosely in your hand, one in each hand like this, with the 2 ends pointing out like that. Walk slowly over an area. If you walk over a water line with water in it, the ends will do this.